Welcome to our first show in the year 2012. I'm Amanda Bush, your host, with the following stories this time. Grail twins back together again in lunar orbit. Commercial suborbital vehicles are for science too. Comet Lovejoy puts on a great show and a super encore. Furthermore, I am pleased to introduce James C. Birk to you, our new correspondent and host for the Space Weather Show at the end of this broadcast. In September of last year, NASA launched two identical spacecraft towards the Moon on slow energy-saving trajectories. The Grail spacecraft have now reached the Moon and went into orbit over New Year's weekend. As the two vehicles orbit the Moon, they will stay about 200 kilometers from each other. As they fly over the surface at an altitude of about 50 kilometers, variations in the density of the lunar crust and mantle will cause one spacecraft to speed up or slow down relative to the other one. By monitoring the resulting variations in the distance between the spacecraft, a highly accurate mapping of the internal density of the Moon will be obtained. Such a mapping will tell scientists a great deal about the formation of the Moon, and in turn, about the formation of the Earth and the other rocky planets in the inner solar system. In cooperation with Sally Ride, an education program called Mooncam will allow middle school students to select target areas on the lunar surface for imaging by cameras on the two spacecraft. A student contest was sponsored by the Grail team to choose names for the two Grail spacecraft, currently only known as Grail A and Grail B. The winning names should soon be announced. After World War II, a large number of surplus German V2 rockets were brought to the US for study and testing. Soon scientists were taking advantage of these rockets to do high-altitude atmospheric research and imaging of the Earth for the first time. When used for science missions, suborbital rockets like the V2, which can go up to high altitudes and back down, came to be called sounding rockets from the nautical term sounding for taking a measurement. NASA still funds sounding rocket launches for many types of research such as atmospheric studies, solar observations and ultraviolet astronomy. Though much cheaper than orbital flights, an experiment on a sounding rocket can still cost several $100,000, and a scientist may need to wait for years before finally seeing an experiment launched. The payload might be recovered via parachute, but generally the rocket booster is lost. The new commercial suborbital space vehicles such as the Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2 and X-Core Aerospace's Lynx rocket plane are aimed primarily at the space tourism market. However, there has been growing interest in using such vehicles for high-altitude science applications. These fully reusable vehicles have a number of advantages over sounding rockets. They are fully reusable, so they will offer lower costs. They can be quickly flown again, perhaps in the same day, and in many cases, allow for human assistance in monitoring and running the experiment. Dr. Alan Stern, who has been the head of NASA's Science Division and is currently the chief scientist on the New Horizons mission to Pluto, has become fervent enthusiast for science with reusable suborbital vehicles. He has helped to organize several conferences on this topic, which have been attended by several hundred researchers in many different fields. He believes the science market for such vehicles may eventually be larger than space tourism. Stern has guided the Southwest Research Institute to reserve research flights on both Spaceship 2 and Lynx. Another group at the Pacific Research Institute has signed an agreement with X-Core to fly a telescope mounted on top of the vehicle. getting above the interference of the atmosphere is needed for some kinds of astronomical observations such as those made in the ultraviolet. NASA has created a special department called the Flight Opportunities Office to fund experiments on reusable suborbital space vehicles. In addition to the winged vehicles from Virgin Galactic and X-Corp, flights on vertical takeoff and landing vehicles from Armadillo Aerospace and Mason Space Systems are offered. Reusable suborbital space vehicles should become very popular for scientific, educational, and technology testing applications. So space tourists will just have to scoot over and make room for researchers. Comet Lovejoy has become a star, so to speak. It has made one great celestial glamour shot after another. The comet was discovered last November by Australian amateur astronomer Terry Lovejoy. He saw it heading for the sun, and everyone assumed that the comet would be consumed in the solar cauldron like so many comets before it. Amazingly, Comet Lovejoy instead skimmed over the solar flames and headed back out into interplanetary space. It suffered a lost tail, but soon gained a new one. The comet is currently visible from the southern hemisphere. Crew members on the International Space Station got a fantastic view of the comet as it appeared above the Earth's rim. And now, as promised, I hand over to Jim for the space weather forecast. Anything dangerous up there, Jim?
Hi, I am James C. Birk, hosting your space weather news. First, what is space weather, and why do we broadcast information like this? Well, conditions on the sun and in the solar wind, magnetosphere, ionosphere, and thermosphere influence the performance and reliability of spaceborne and ground-based technological systems and can endanger human life or health. Furthermore, there are a lot of asteroids, comets, space debris, like Phobos Grund for example, and other objects flying around that can threaten us too. Today, we will start with near-Earth asteroids, so-called potentially hazardous asteroids, or PHS, and include other issues step by step with future shows. Okay, let's start. By January 10, 2012, there were 1,272 potentially hazardous asteroids detected. On January 16, asteroid 2011 YH40 will pass by in just 5.4 times the distance between Earth and Moon, called lunar distance, or LD. This asteroid has a size of 109 meters and could cause considerable damage when hitting the Earth. A much larger asteroid, called 1991 VK, has its closest encounter at January 25 with 25.3 LDs. Eros 433, an asteroid with a size of 8.5 kilometers, will fly by around January 31 with a distance of 69.5 LDs. That's it for this time. Back to you, Amanda.
Thanks for watching. Our next show is planned for early February. Stay tuned and keep visiting www.hobbyspace.com for the latest space news.